Okay, what we're going to look at when we want to do an exercise, obviously in any exercise routine, especially if you're feeling a little stiff, a little pain, a little cranky in the body, obviously get a good warm up. If you get your body temperature up, you start to sweat, the body gets a little bit more mobile, and you can usually handle a lot of different exercise much better than just coming out of the gates cold. So we're assuming that you're going to do a warm up routine. We're going to do a bridge exercise. Seems pretty rudimentary. We just have a specific way that we really want to concentrate on doing it. So the heels are going to start in line with the sit bones. The body's going to be nice and flat, so we want to make sure that we pay attention to the head posture, chin in, eyes down. If we're really tight in the spine or in the neck and our head is really dumped backwards, we can put a little pad or a little incline underneath the back of the head to make sure that the rest of the spine is nice and flat. Now we want to try to position the pelvis. So for most of you, if you know how to rock your pelvis, we have a little anterior or posterior pelvic tilt. That's just tucking your tail underneath or sticking your tail out like you want to arch your back. So what we want to avoid is this position. We want to activate the glutes. The glutes, if we just lay here and if you just squeeze your glutes, automatically that's going to put your pelvis into a tucked position, okay? So our starting posture will be to slightly tuck the tail. We want our spine flat into the floor or the mat. And all we're gonna do at this point is we're gonna lift our pelvis off the floor, and we want to roll one vertebrae at a time all the way up to potentially the level of the shoulder blades. But again, trying to avoid any arching of that back. So a lot of times I see people doing bridges and they're really pressing their pelvis up high. Go ahead and do that for us. And when they press up high, you can see that she gets a lot of arching through that lower back. And all that's doing is jamming that lower spine. So we want to, again, to review, tuck that tail, spine is flat. We want to maintain this tuck position and squeeze those glutes into our tall position of the bridge position. And then we're gonna roll back down one vertebrae at a time, and it's like we want to stop right at the spine, trying to keep almost that pelvis in that up tucked position. And then we're gonna repeat that several times. Squeeze the glutes and roll back down, keeping our pelvis in that tucked position. Usually in a warm-up set or in an activation set, we're looking at anywhere from 20 to 50 reps. Sometimes we can do upwards of 1 to 3 sets. So find what's good for you. A lot of times I'll interval this in between my lifting sets just to keep the glutes working the right way and get them activated and make sure that the whole pelvic lower spine system is warmed up. The next exercise we like to utilize as activation. So we looked at the glutes, now we're looking at the abs. So something that helps stabilize the pelvis. The abs are obviously part of the stabilizers of the lower spine, and because they're attached to the pelvis, they help that relationship. So a lot of times in the stabilizing effect of any sort of lift, deadlifts, kettlebell swings, back squats, anything that we're doing that might be more strength exercise based, is to activate these lower abs, because a lot of times if you don't have a good postural position, the abs will be turned off, and we want to activate them so that they're engaged during the lifts. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna have you bring your legs up in a tabletop position. I like the knees together. If you can't get the knees together, that's problematic. Sometimes I like taking a yoga block and putting that between the knees. We wanna try to bring those knees just about over the hips. So you can see if I go this way, that's past the hips. If I go back this way, then I'm more in line with where the hip and the pelvis is, like I'm in a 90-degree position. I want her to fix her arms or her upper body, so she's gonna take both arms behind her head, and we want to reach those elbows away from the body. From this position, she's going to breathe out, and as she breathes out, she's trying to lift her pelvis or push the knees up towards the ceiling and then slowly roll back down. Now she's got some good strength in her abs, she's got some good mobility of her lower spine, so you can see that there's a lot of movement here. For most people, you may only feel the activation of the exercise in the lower abs and not get a lot of movement. That's normal for most people. So what we want to make sure that we do, that we breathe, we're breathing out during the action of the exercise, and then we inhale as we bring the pelvis back down. You can see that she's working very controlled and she's not jumping up off the ground or anything like that to help compensate. So we want to make sure that those knees are trying to work towards the ceiling and lift, as opposed to starting to cheat back and go towards the head. But again, that might be somewhere where you need to start to try to minimize any stress to the lower back or to the abs if you're not strong enough and you're trying to build strength here. So usually, again, if we can get anywhere upwards of 20 reps to 50 reps, 1 to 3 sets, this is a good exercise to activate these lower abdominals and get you ready for any of your lifts. Any questions?
No, I do like that though, because I do have several clients that if I say reverse crunches, and it's just.
Yeah. So that's a lot of times what we see is just this jumping exercise. The only other modification that we can work with to help create some awareness is imagine I'm the wall or I'm a bench and you can rest the legs there, which helps take the weight of the body away from the lower half. And all you're doing now is focusing on the activation and lifting and rolling that pelvis up off the ground like you're still trying to press those knees towards the ceiling. Obviously the goal is not to use the hamstrings or the glutes to do the lift. We want to try to leave the work in those lower abs.
You definitely feel the lower abs, so it's good.
This is going to be our psoas myofascial stretch or mobility for the hip flexors. So we've done a stretch for the glute. We want to hit the other side of the body. And again, this is best served doing at the end of a workout. So regardless of lower back pain, tightness, pelvic stuff, this is really one of our go-to stretches in all of our programming to help balance out the relationship of the spine, the pelvis, and the lower leg or the limb. So go ahead and step your right leg forward. When we're in a split stance position, everybody's split stance is going to be slightly different. So if you're more of a flexible person, you're going to want to have this foot a little bit more forward. If you're not so flexible, you can keep it slightly back. But we also want to make sure that that foot is stepped out a little bit wide so that we have a good foundation or base underneath this and it doesn't feel like we're trying to do a balancing exercise while doing our stretch. We're going to keep the pelvis over the down knee. To start, I'm going to pivot on that down knee so that we create an internal rotation of this hip. So we're going to slide that foot out as wide as we possibly can. When we do that, sometimes that turns our pelvis. So we just want to turn our pelvis back to the straight position here where our belt buckle is going forward. The spine's going to start up in a nice tall position, and I'm going to have her hinge forward a little bit from the hips or the waist and try to bring her shoulders in front of her pelvis. Now that she's there, I'm going to ask her to tuck that tail even more. When we tuck the tail, it's like we're trying to put that tail underneath us, or our belt buckle is trying to lift up towards our chest. So once we're in that position, she can start to move forward into the posture, and as she moves forward into the posture, she's going to lean onto this thigh, and she can take her open arm and reach it away, pushing that palm away. So it's almost like we say Spider-Man hands, open palm, fingers are reaching, we're lengthening through the crown of the head. She's working on tucking that tail as much as possible while moving forward and elongating through that spine. So it's like both of the knees want to separate away from each other, or the crown of the head and the knees want to separate, and the arm and the knee wants to separate, so that we can create a nice long stretch through this down leg side that we should feel here in the front.
Yes.
So again, we're going to hold this for 30 seconds. 3 rounds. We can alternate sides as we work through those 3 rounds, but our real goal is to try to get this stretch through the front down leg of the body, which is our psoas. We're going to transition with our lower back program into some mobility exercises. So we did 2 activation exercises for you during the workout or before the workout starts. Now we've approached ourselves towards the end of the workout, and we want to work on a little bit of mobility. Now I will preface this by saying sometimes before a workout you do feel a little bit tight. It's usually not a good idea to do any static stretching before you lift any weights or do anything too dynamic, because you tend to destabilize the communication pathways of your tissues. So these are more appropriate for the end of the workout, but sometimes you can do some mobilizing or some stretching more dynamically at the beginning of a workout if you're feeling really tight in some of these areas. So we're going to do a glute stretch. So this is a very typical figure 4 stretch that we're going to look at. She's going to go ahead and cross her ankle to her knee. Now we want to be a little specific when we do a stretch like this, because most people kind of do it passively even though they're doing the stretch themselves. The spine is flat, the chin is in, the eyes are looking down. You can see her ankle bone is going to be past her knee or on the outside of her thigh to make sure that it's not pushing in on the top of the thigh there. She's going to flex her ankle to pull her little pinky toes to the outside of her knee so that we get a little bit of tension in this lower part of the leg. She'll take both of her arms and get them on her thigh. I prefer holding underneath the calf here or up behind the thigh rather than on top of the knee when you work like this, because it gives you a little bit of leverage to be able to use this elbow and press that knee out and away from you as you pull your thigh towards you. So the stretching leg is the crossed over leg. You can see that as she pulls that thigh towards her, she now has to try to press that knee away. We want to make sure that the pelvis is level to the ground. She keeps her head nice and flat. The shoulders are down out of her ears. And the last thing we want to look at, this foot can flex too, is to try to press that pelvis back towards the floor as she creates this tug of war. So the pelvis is trying to press down, the leg is trying to pull in with the arms, and we're trying to push this stretching side leg with the forearm and elbow to turn that leg out so that we create that rotation in this thigh and get that stretch where we would normally feel it for our glute, which is kind of in our back pocket. Typically, we're going to do this stretch 3 times, 30 seconds. We can alternate sides in between each set or rep, and that's going to really help with mobility and recovery for our glute area.